Hey, so a big part of Slack gardening involves clearing up and renaming channels so that things don't get messy and people know where to find stuff and know where to post stuff without having to think too hard about it. And there's obviously a whole bunch more to like Slack gardening well, but this is definitely one of the things that Slack gardeners want to spend a little bit of time with, particularly in Slacks that haven't had much love and attention and have got kind of messy over time. Um, but for people in channels, it can be really, really jarring when channels disappear or change name without warning. We all get used to knowing the names of the channels that we tend to use regularly and where we want to go. And if they change name or the naming conventions change or they disappear or whatever, it can be super, super confusing and make you wonder what's going on. And that's doubly important if whoever's making the change isn't part of the community that hangs out in a particular channel. So if you're a Slack gardener um, and you're visiting another channel basically to be like, hey, we want to sort out some naming conventions, or we want to maybe merge a couple of channels. Like, it's easy to have that conversation or make those changes if you know what's going on in that channel. It's much harder to do that if you're kind of just coming in to a little community of people who have a Slack channel where they chat about whatever, and it can be super jarring. So it shouldn't really matter this, but a lot of folks care a lot about their Slack channel names. So we probably want to be a little bit nicer when we're going to try and do that stuff. So when I've had to rename channels, I've tended to do something like this: drop a message in saying, "Hey, I'm on a mission to rename some stuff. Um, how about these?" And propose some suggestions. And again, I'm using an emoji voting here and asking for people to basically respond and be like, "What do you think?" and involve them in that name change. And then I just set a reminder to myself to look at this again in like 24 hours or 48 hours or something, and then came back and dropped a message saying, all right, cool, decision made, we're going to rename this at a certain time. And then again, another reminder, and I'll rename it. And this kind of makes people feel like they've been involved in the process of choosing Slack channel names. And the same thing's true if we want to close a channel. So, like in general, if I find some channels where I'm like, I feel like this is dead, it's not being used that much, I can drop some messages in saying, hey, is this channel dead? If nobody responds, then obviously it is, right? But otherwise, you can have like a conversation in there about whether we should, what should we do? Should we rename it? Should we totally kill it? And should we try and use it properly, put a description? Or should we just leave it be? And again, by asking folks what to do best and making suggestions, it feels a hell of a lot nicer than just going in and killing someone's channel. And I think this matters particularly because some channels that feel like they're dead because they haven't had a post in 6 months aren't necessarily dead. It might be that they just have a very, very specific use case. A good example of that from a Slack I used to be in, there was a channel for posting security incident reports. And so if everything was going well, there was nothing in that channel, but it still had a purpose. So that's why asking what we should do about it is always better than just shutting stuff. And then I guess if I don't get any responses from kind of initial messages or it just tails off a bit, I tend to put a message in with like a clock on it. So as in 24 hours from now, I'll get rid of it. To object, just post in here. And if nobody comes back, then clearly no one cares, and I can go ahead and delete it. And the same thing is true with this kind of thing. So again, I've put a notice in saying, hey, we had a chat in this other channel. We're going to get rid of this one and have these conversations over there. But again, this kind of putting a clock on it is always a much better idea than just running around willy-nilly renaming channels. I would say if you're going around doing this kind of thing, avoid being overzealous when you're pruning. In a really big Slack with mostly private channels, it's bound to be an organic, messy place, and there's no way you can keep an absolute control over naming conventions and all that kind of stuff. So I guess that's where the gardening analogy comes from. It's about pruning rather than like architecture and rigid stuff. There are a few bots that can automate this kind of thing. There are bots that can look at when the last message in a Slack was and then automatically post a message saying, hey, we'll close this. So yeah, you can have a look on the internet for some of those bots.